I didn't start therapy because I believed in it. I started because my job told me I had to. One too many outbursts, they said. Apparently, showing up hungover and slamming your desk drawer after getting dumped by someone you weren't even officially dating was a red flag. So I found a therapist within the company's EAP network, booked the first available session, and showed up 10 minutes late with coffee and zero expectations. I fully intended to say as little as possible, not a lot, and get through the mandatory 6 sessions like it was jury duty. Then I met Dr. Harris. Mid-30s, maybe. Sandy hair with the kind of careless part you only get from habit. His beard was trimmed close, eyes a muted green, the kind that don't flash. They hold, calm, direct. His clothes were forgettable, in the exact way therapist clothes are supposed to be, but I remember the way he tapped his pen on his pad when I stalled. Like he wasn't gonna push, but he was definitely gonna wait me out. He wasn't what I expected. He didn't ask about my childhood or try to make me talk about my mom. He just started with, "So tell me what brought you here." I laughed. "You mean aside from HR?" He smirked. "We can start there." And just like that, I was talking. Way more than I planned to. Weird thing is, it kept happening. Week after week, I'd go in thinking I'd keep it surface level, and next thing I knew, I was admitting stuff I hadn't said out loud in years. Nothing dramatic. Just things I'd buried under sarcasm and bad coping habits. How I always feel like a guest in other people's lives. How I don't trust compliments. How I sometimes hook up with guys I don't even like just to prove I'm not as lonely as I feel. He never judged, never flinched, just listened, nodded, occasionally asked something that twisted the knife just enough to make me think. And I kept showing up. Voluntarily. Even after the mandatory 6 sessions were up, I kept paying out of pocket. I told myself it was because I liked the structure, that it helped me focus, that it had nothing to do with the way his voice sometimes echoed in my head hours after the session. I wasn't into him. Not really. I mean, sure, he was attractive, but this wasn't some cheesy movie plot. He was my therapist, a professional, ethical, detached. At least, that's what I thought. Until one session, 3 months in, when I told him something I hadn't planned to tell anyone. It was about this guy, Evan. We'd been sort of seeing each other, which meant we slept together twice and texted sporadically. I liked him more than I should have. And of course, he ghosted. Standard stuff. But the thing was, I took it hard. Too hard. Like I'd been waiting for it, and when it happened, it just confirmed every awful thing I already thought about myself. I sat across from Dr. Harris, staring at the little clock on the table, and said, "I know it doesn't make sense to be this upset. It was barely even a thing. But it's like every time I start to feel anything, it ends before I even get a chance to figure out if it mattered. Like I'm not even worth the trial period." He didn't say anything right away. He never rushed to fill silences, which usually annoyed me, but this time I was grateful. I couldn't look at him, so I just kept talking. I think I'm tired of being the guy people settle for when they're bored, or lonely, or horny. I'm never the one they choose when they're ready to stay. Still, nothing, just quiet. Then finally, softly he said it. "Maybe they don't see what I see." I looked up, frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He blinked, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. Then, too late, he cleared his throat. "I mean, from what you've shared, you're empathetic. Insightful. Funny, there's a depth to you that—" He stopped, closed his notebook. "Sorry," he said quickly, looking anywhere but at me. That was out of line. The room felt suddenly smaller, thicker, like all the oxygen had been sucked out. "What did you mean by that?" I asked, heart hammering. He met my gaze, and in that moment, I knew. He wasn't just trying to validate me. That wasn't some generic therapist pep talk. He'd meant it. That's when I realized the way I looked at him all this time wasn't as one-sided as I thought. I don't know what I expected him to do after that. Laugh it off, maybe. Change the subject. Remind me he was a therapist and I was a client, and that boundaries existed for a reason. But he didn't do any of that. He just sat there, looking like he'd accidentally stepped off the edge of a cliff. I broke the silence first. "You weren't supposed to say that." Dr. Harris nodded, slowly. "I know." We stared at each other for a long time, the kind of silence that feels like it's holding its breath. My skin prickled under his gaze, not because it was invasive, but because it wasn't. It was tender, careful, like he was seeing every broken part of me and choosing not to flinch. "I should go," I muttered, standing up even though we still had 10 minutes left. He didn't stop me. "All right," he said, voice even but low. "If you need to talk, you can reach out. I mean that." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment over and over. His voice, the hesitation, the look in his eyes when he realized what he'd said. It didn't feel predatory. It didn't feel like a line crossed because of power or ego. It felt real, human, and that scared the shit out of me. The next session I skipped. I didn't cancel. I just didn't show. A week passed. Then 2. I told myself I was done, that I didn't need therapy anymore, that I'd gotten what I needed out of it. But the truth was messier. I wasn't done. I was afraid. Afraid of what it would mean to go back. Afraid of what he'd say if I did. Then, after a month of silence, he emailed me. Subject: "Hope you're well. Hey, just checking in. I noticed you haven't been in for a while. No pressure to return if you feel you're ready to move on. But if you're avoiding because of what I said, I owe you an apology. That moment was unprofessional. You deserved better. All the same, the space is always here if you want to come back. Take care. Dr. Harris." I read it 5 times. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk that turned into a 2-hour aimless loop through my neighborhood. By the time I got home, my mind was made up. I emailed him back. Asked if I could come in, not as a client, just to talk. He replied 2 hours later. Subject: "Hope you're well. I'd be glad to see you. After hours. No charge. Just a conversation. Let me know what works for you." We met the following Tuesday. His office was the same as always. Minimalist, clean, quiet. But the air between us was different now. Less clinical, more raw. He offered me water. I declined. We both sat. Neither of us spoke for a full minute. Then I said, "Why did you say it?" He exhaled, his shoulders tensing slightly. Because it was true. And because in that moment, I forgot I wasn't supposed to. "And what did you mean by it?" "I meant," he said, his voice steady but gentle, "that I see you. Not just as a client, not just as a file or a story or a diagnosis. I see you. And it's been harder than I expected to stay neutral." I swallowed, pulse racing. "You're not supposed to say that either," I whispered. "I know," he said again. We sat in the quiet for another moment, the weight of what we both weren't supposed to say thick in the air. "Are you telling me this because you want something from me?" I asked finally. "No," he said quickly. "I'm telling you this because I needed to be honest. With you. With myself. And what happens now?" He leaned back, his eyes searching mine. "That depends on you." I wasn't ready to answer him. Not yet. I left that day, still unsure of everything except one thing. This story between us wasn't over. The problem with something unspoken is that once it is spoken, it doesn't go back in the box. I tried. I really did. I went home after that after-hours conversation, sat on my couch, turned on some background Netflix, and told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just a moment, that maybe Dr. Harris, Noah, I guess, though I still couldn't bring myself to call him that, was just dealing with some burnout or loneliness or whatever it is therapists get when they've been too composed for too long. But the thing is, I hadn't imagined it. The shift was real. The way his voice changed when he talked to me. The way his eyes lingered like he wasn't analyzing anymore, just looking. It was quiet and careful, but it was real. And I'd felt it too. For weeks. Maybe longer. So when I got an email from him 2 days later, not from his professional account, but a personal one, I didn't delete it. I didn't tell myself this was unethical or weird. I just opened it. Hey, I realize I've put you in a complicated position. I'm not asking for anything, but I'd be lying if I said I haven't thought about what it might look like if things were different. That said, I know boundaries matter. If this is the last time we talk, I'll understand. But if you'd be open to seeing me, as me, not your therapist, I'd like to grab a coffee sometime. Just as people, not professionals. I'll leave the ball in your court. No pressure. Noah. I stared at the screen for so long that my screen went dim. I reread the message a dozen times. There was no hidden agenda, no manipulation, just a quiet, measured risk. A week passed before I answered. Hey, I don't know if I'm ready, but I'm curious. I'll meet you for that coffee. We picked a place in a neighborhood neither of us lived in, neutral ground. I showed up 10 minutes early and immediately regretted it. I kept checking my phone like I was on a blind date, heart hammering so loud I could feel it in my ears. Then he walked in. It was the first time I'd seen him not in his office. No notepad, no clock ticking in the background, just jeans, a dark sweater, and a jacket slung over one shoulder. Still him, but different. More relaxed, more human. Hey, he said, as he slid into the chair across from me. I nodded, still trying to decide if this was a terrible idea or just a terrifying one. We ordered. Small talk happened. The weather, the bakery, the city, but underneath it was that same current, the thing neither of us could name yet, but both of us could feel. He watched me carefully, not like a therapist anymore, but like someone who wanted to know how much he was allowed to want. Can I ask you something? I said, halfway through my drink. Anything. Why me? He didn't hesitate. Because I saw how hard you try. To hold yourself together. To pretend you don't care when you obviously do. And because every week you walked in with sarcasm as armor and still let yourself be real underneath it. I didn't know what to say to that. I know this is messy, he added, quieter now. I'd understand if you walked away. But I had to give you the choice. I nodded, heart in my throat. You're not my therapist anymore, I said. No, he agreed. I'm not. There was a pause, and then I said it. Okay. Okay, he asked, brow raised. Okay, I repeated. Let's see where this goes. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that felt like the first deep breath after holding it for way too long. It didn't feel wrong. It felt like something new. Something honest. Dating someone who used to be your therapist is weird. There's no way around it. It's not like we skipped off into the sunset the second I said, okay. No. It was awkward. Slow. Borderline painful at times. There were rules. Ones we made up as we went. No talking about old sessions. No therapy talk at all, actually. And definitely no references to things I said while sitting on that couch across from him. Except sometimes that was hard. Like when I'd make a self-deprecating joke, and I could see the flicker in his eyes, like he remembered the first time I said something similar, years ago, behind a clinical wall. Or the way he'd ask how work was going, but his tone was just a little more careful, because he already knew I spiraled when I felt overlooked. Still, we made it work. At least, we were trying to. Our coffee turned into another meetup. Then another. Then a late-night drink at a dim bar on the east side, where the music was just loud enough that we had to lean in to hear each other. At one point, I looked at him mid-laugh and realized I wasn't nervous anymore. We were just two people, and maybe something was starting. But not everything was easy. The first time he reached across the table and touched my hand, I flinched. Not because I didn't want it, but because I did. Badly. And wanting it made everything real. Tangible. Dangerous. He pulled back like he'd read my hesitation as regret. No, I said quickly. It's not that. He didn't push. Just nodded. That night I lay awake, staring at my ceiling fan, replaying that moment. His hand, the light in his eyes when he touched me, the soft fall of his expression when he thought it was too soon. He wasn't just some random guy the first was dating. He already knew me. The broken parts, the jagged edges. All the stuff I usually waited 6 months to slowly reveal in a relationship. He'd already seen it. He'd sat with it. And instead of flinching, he'd stayed. But what I hadn't realized until then was that I didn't know him yet. Not really. So the next time we saw each other, I said, "Okay, your turn." "My turn?" "You already know all the messed up parts of me," I said, half smiling. "Time to even the playing field," he grinned. "That's not how it works." "Sure it is. You want this to be real? You gotta let me see the cracks too." He paused, then nodded. That night we walked for over 2 hours through quiet city blocks. Him telling me about the time his dad walked out, how he buried himself in school to cope, how he'd been engaged once, years ago, and walked away from it because he didn't know how to be loved back then. How he sometimes hated the way his work made people see him as some stable, emotionless rock when he was barely keeping his own shit together half the time. I listened, really listened. And when we stopped outside my building, I reached for his hand this time. "I want to kiss you," I said, voice low, his breath hitched. "You sure?" "No," I admitted, "but I want to do it anyway." He smiled, just barely, and leaned in. And when our lips finally met, it didn't feel like crossing a line. It felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. The first kiss wasn't fireworks. It wasn't clumsy either. It was quiet, measured. Like both of us were trying not to scare the moment away. Like we knew if we moved too fast, it might collapse under the weight of what it meant. Afterward, we just stood there. His hand still holding mine. His forehead resting lightly against mine like he wasn't ready to let go. I wasn't either. Then, softly, he said, "You didn't flinch this time." I smiled without pulling back. "That's because I wanted it." He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh, but it caught somewhere in his throat. "I've wanted to kiss you for longer than I should probably admit." "You already crossed that line," I said, half joking. He nodded. "I know. Still figuring out how to live on this side of it." The weeks that followed were a blur of things that felt both brand new and oddly familiar. Dinner dates, walks through bookstores, late-night conversations that bled into early mornings. The first time he stayed over, we didn't even sleep together. We just lay in bed, facing each other, legs tangled, hands clasped like we were afraid the other would disappear if we let go. And God, it was terrifying how natural it felt. But the world doesn't exactly offer a rule book for how to navigate a relationship with someone who used to be your therapist. We kept it quiet. I didn't tell my friends at first, not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was playing with fire. And I guess part of me was scared they'd look at him differently. Like he'd taken advantage, like what we had couldn't be real. He didn't push me to make it public. If anything, he seemed relieved to keep things between us. "Let it breathe," he said once, over coffee on my balcony. "Let it become real before we let the world in." So that's what we did. We carved out this private space for ourselves, a space that wasn't defined by couches or notebooks or carefully timed 50-minute hours, a space where I could call him Noah and he could call me at midnight, just to say he was thinking about me. But then something happened that I hadn't planned for. One night we were curled up on my couch, half watching a movie, when he leaned over, kissed my shoulder, and said, "You know, I think I'm falling for you." He didn't say it like a declaration, he said it like a confession, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed. And the moment he said it, everything in me tightened, not in fear, but in recognition, because I felt the same way. I just hadn't said it yet. I turned to him, heart pounding in my chest, and said the words before I could second-guess them. "I think I already fell." His eyes flickered, surprised, but then they softened. "Yeah? Yeah." He kissed me again, slower this time, like we weren't rushing anymore, like we knew we had time. But the world, outside our little bubble, that was a different story, because keeping us quiet wasn't going to work forever, and the moment other people found out, everything would change. The first person I told was Max, my best friend. We were grabbing beers at this half-dive bar we liked, the kind where no one talks above a murmur and the fries always taste like the fryer oil's never been changed. I figured if anyone could handle weird news with zero judgment, it was him. Still, I hesitated. Max had seen me at my worst. Post-breakup spirals, Sunday hangovers, the time I accidentally texted, "You up?" to my boss. He'd never made me feel small for any of it, but this was different. "So there's someone I've been seeing," I said, keeping it casual. He grinned. "About time. What's his deal?" "He's older." "Okay." "And you've actually met him?" "Kind of." Max blinked. "Wait, do I know him?" I exhaled. "It's Dr. Harris." His face froze for a solid 3 seconds. Then he leaned back, mouth opening slowly. "Your therapist?" "Former therapist." I corrected quickly. "Not, like, current." And it wasn't like anything happened when I was his client. I stopped going. We didn't even talk for weeks. Then he reached out. Max held up a hand. "Whoa. Okay, give me a second to catch up." I shut up, let him process. He took a long sip of his beer, then looked at me again. "Are you serious about him?" "Yeah," I said without flinching. "I am." Another pause. Then, "Is he serious about you?" "Yeah." "He's different when we're together. It's real. It feels healthy, which is new for me." Max stared at me for a moment longer, then finally nodded. "Okay, that's all I needed to know." Just like that. "Really?" I asked. "Dude," he said, smirking. "You've dated a guy who got blackout drunk and tried to name your ficus. I'll take a hot therapist who respects boundaries over that any day." I laughed. God, I needed that. Telling Max gave me more confidence. Enough to start seeing Noah out in public, in daylight, without ducking behind corners or pretending we were just two guys hanging out. We grabbed brunch one weekend, and he reached for my hand over the table. I didn't pull away. But the real test came a few days later. When I bumped into one of Noah's former colleagues outside a bookstore, she recognized me instantly. "Hey, weren't you one of Noah Harris's clients?" I froze. Yeah, I was," she smiled, oblivious. "Small world. Haven't seen him since he left the practice." Left? I played it cool until she walked away. Then I called him. "You left your practice?" he sighed. "Yeah, I meant to tell you. I gave notice a few weeks ago. I'm transitioning into private consulting work. Fewer clients. More flexibility." "Because of me?" "Partly," he admitted. "It was already in motion, but yeah. I didn't want there to be any gray area. No ethical overlap." The thought that he'd made such a big change, one that could impact his career, for me, it hit harder than I expected. Later that night, when we were lying in bed, I asked him, "Do you ever regret it, saying what you said that day?" He looked over at me. "No. I regret the timing, maybe, but not the truth of it." "And if I had walked away?" He turned onto his side, propped up on an elbow. "Then I'd have respected that and quietly hated myself for a while." I smiled. "I'm glad I didn't." "Me too." We were quiet for a while, just breathing in the same space, no words needed. And in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't admitted until now. I trusted him. Not just the part of him that once sat across from me with a notepad, but the part of him who showed up after. The part who saw me not as a case to solve, but as someone he genuinely wanted to hold on to. The funny thing about trust is that you never really know you have it until something threatens to shake it. We were at his apartment, his new one, smaller than the sleek space he used to live in near the clinic, but warmer, cozier, more him. He'd just finished cooking dinner. This ridiculous garlic shrimp pasta, he insisted, was nothing, despite taking 40 minutes and 3 different pans. We ate on the couch, wine glasses half full, music playing low in the background. It was one of those nights where everything felt easy, until his phone buzzed. I wouldn't have even noticed if he hadn't gone completely still when he looked at the screen. "Everything okay?" I asked, between bites. He hesitated, then flipped the phone over so I couldn't see it. "Yeah, just a message from an old colleague." The air in the room shifted. It wasn't the first time he'd gotten quiet about that part of his life. The professional circle he used to be part of, the therapist friends he no longer seemed to keep in touch with. But this was different. This time, I felt it. The wall. I waited, giving him a second. When he didn't elaborate, I asked, "Do you want to talk about it?" He looked at me for a long beat. No. It stung more than I expected. I didn't push, though. I just nodded, tried to act cool about it, even as the wine turned bitter on my tongue. Later that night, after we brushed our teeth side by side, he caught me staring at my reflection, jaw tight. "You're quiet," he said gently. I shrugged. Didn't want to break any unspoken rules. He blinked. "What rules?" "The ones where you don't talk about work stuff, and I pretend not to notice when you're shutting me out." There was a pause. Then he sighed. "Shit." "What?" He turned toward me, toothbrush still in hand. "You're right. I was shutting you out." I crossed my arms. "Why?" "Because I'm not used to being seen outside the therapy room," he said, rinsing the sink. "It's easy to sit on the other side of the couch and ask the questions. It's harder to be the one answering them." "I'm not asking for your life story," I said. "I just don't want to feel like I'm still on the outside looking in." "You're not," he said quietly. "You're not." I nodded, trying to believe it. He reached for me then, hand settling on my neck, thumb brushing the edge of my jaw. "I'm still learning how to do this. Not be your therapist, just be yours." That stopped me. He leaned in, forehead against mine. "I want this. I'm all in, but I need you to call me out when I pull away. I don't always know I'm doing it." My chest tightened. "Okay." We stood like that for a while, quiet, steady. It wasn't romantic in the movie kind of way. It was better. It was real. That night, he pulled me closer than usual in bed, held me like he didn't want there to be space between us at all. And as I drifted off, his voice barely above a whisper, he said it. "I think I'm in love with you." I didn't say it back right away. Not because I didn't feel it, but because I knew he needed to say it first. For himself. For his own heart. But the next morning, while he was still half asleep and reaching for me beneath the sheets, I kissed the corner of his mouth and whispered, "I love you too." And I meant it. Every word. Falling in love with someone is easy when you already know the deepest parts of them. But staying in love, choosing them, day after day, after the butterflies settle and the real-world mess creeps back in, that's the hard part. And we chose each other. We didn't move in together right away. We kept our own places, our own routines, but we spent most nights together. He started leaving his toothbrush in my bathroom, and I started memorizing the way he liked his coffee. We were figuring it out slowly, intentionally, carefully, but not fearfully. I noticed the small shifts in him, the way he laughed more freely, talked about his day without censoring himself. He wasn't just my former therapist anymore. He was just Noah, my boyfriend. A guy who left his socks on the floor, burned toast every third morning, and got really into obscure documentaries about cave diving. One night, we were lying on my couch watching something stupid. He had his head on my chest, our legs tangled like always, when he looked up at me, completely serious. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Us?" I didn't hesitate. "No, do you?" He shook his head. "Not even for a second." But I think about how easily it could have gone wrong," he admitted. "How much trust it took for both of us to get here." "It still takes trust," I said. "Every day." He smiled at that. "Yeah, it does." There were times we still hit bumps. Miscommunications, insecurities that crept back up, Moments where I'd pull away without realizing, and he'd gently call me on it. But that was the difference now. We talked through it. We didn't hide. The weirdest part? Telling people. My friends got used to it quickly. Some even joked about it, calling him Dr. Boyfriend, until I threatened to change the group chat name to something truly unholy. His old colleagues were more complicated, but most of them kept a respectful distance. And those who didn't, he didn't care. He once told me, if someone sees this as unprofessional instead of human, that says more about them than it does about us. And that stuck with me. One morning, a full year after our first unofficial date, he left a note on my pillow, just a folded piece of paper in his messy handwriting. It said, I still see you, and I still choose you. Every damn day. I kept that note, still do. Because, yeah, maybe our story didn't start in the traditional way, but every part of it, the risk, the weight, the doubt, the whisper of, you're not supposed to say that, led us here, to something honest, to something real, to him, and to me, finally being seen, not as someone to fix, but as someone worth loving,